My husband's mistress screamed as I showed her the proof that would ruin her life. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who got cheated on. Not because I believed in fairy tales or thought my marriage was perfect, but because I was smart. I was careful, I knew the warning signs, had seen friends go through it, and always told myself I'd never let a man make a fool out of me. And yet there I was, sitting in my car, gripping my phone so hard my fingers ached, staring at the proof that my husband had been lying to me for months. His name was Mark. We had been together for 10 years, married for 6. To everyone else, we looked like the perfect couple. Steady jobs, a nice house, a comfortable life. But in reality, things had been off for a while. It was little things at first. He started working late more often, suddenly caring more about his appearance, acting distant even when we were in the same room. I ignored it for a while, convincing myself it was just stress. But then came the biggest red flag of all, the password change. Mark had always been careless with his phone. He never used to hide anything, so when I tried to check the weather one day and saw that his passcode had changed, my stomach dropped. I didn't say anything at first, wanting to see how long he'd keep up the act. Then, a week later, he was in the shower, and his iPad, which still had the old password, was sitting on the nightstand. Curiosity turned into something colder as I opened his messages. It didn't take long to find them. Her name was Vanessa. The texts stretched back for months. At first, they were just flirty, the kind of messages that might seem harmless to someone in denial. Then they turned into something else. Plans, hotel receipts, intimate details that made my skin crawl. I scrolled through them, heart hammering, until I found the worst one. I love you. Mark had never been the overly romantic type. He'd told me he loved me, sure, but never like that. Never passionately, never like he meant it. But there it was, plain as day, sent to her. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind racing between rage and devastation. I could have confronted him right then and there. I could have screamed, thrown his iPad at the wall, packed my bags, and left. But none of that would have satisfied me. No, I needed to do something better, something that would destroy both of them the way they had destroyed my trust. So I wiped my tears, steadied my breathing, and started planning. The first thing I did was dig deeper. I copied every message, every screenshot, every incriminating detail, and saved them in a folder on my laptop. Then I started researching Vanessa. She wasn't just some random fling. She was married. That little detail made my blood sing. This wasn't just a betrayal to me. It was a betrayal to her husband, too. And if I played my cards right, I could take both of them down at the same time. It didn't take long to find her husband. His name was Daniel, and a quick search led me to his social media. A proud husband, father of 2, the kind of guy who posted anniversary tributes and family vacation photos. The kind of guy who had no idea his wife was sneaking around behind his back. I debated messaging him right away, but I wanted to be strategic. If I wanted to make this hurt the most, I had to time it perfectly. That's when I found it. A message from Mark to Vanessa. I can't wait to see you this weekend. No more sneaking around, just us. That was all I needed. They were planning a getaway, and I was going to make sure it ended in disaster. On Friday afternoon, I kissed Mark goodbye like nothing was wrong. He had packed an overnight bag, telling me he had a work trip, and I played along, even wishing him good luck. The moment he left, I grabbed my car keys and set off for the hotel they had booked. Thanks to his carelessness, I knew exactly where they'd be. I arrived at the hotel early, sitting in the lobby with a coffee and my laptop, watching as guests came and went. When Mark finally walked in hand with Vanessa, I had to force myself to stay calm. They looked so comfortable together, like they had done this 100 times before. The sight of it made my stomach turn. But I kept my emotions in check. I waited until they had checked in before making my next move. Pulling out my phone, I dialed Daniel's number. He picked up on the 3rd ring, sounding distracted. "Hello? Hi, Daniel. You don't know me, but I have something you need to see. It's about your wife." There was silence on the other end. Then, cautiously, he said, "Who is this?" I took a deep breath. "I'm Mark's wife, and right now, your wife and my husband are in a hotel together." There was a sharp intake of breath, then nothing. "I have proof," I continued. "Messages, dates, everything. I'm sitting in the lobby right now. If you want, I can tell you exactly what room they're in." Daniel didn't answer right away, but when he did, his voice was cold. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up, my heart racing. This was really happening. I made my way toward the elevator, slipping past a distracted front desk worker. Thanks to the messages, I already knew what room they were in. Standing outside the door, I listened carefully. Laughter, muffled conversation, completely unaware of what was coming for them. I sent Daniel the room number and stepped back, waiting. A few minutes later I saw him storming down the hallway, his face set in pure fury. He didn't even hesitate. He pounded on the door, and when there was no immediate answer, he shouted Vanessa's name. There was a scramble inside, then, after a few agonizing seconds, the door creaked open, and Vanessa's face appeared, her expression shifting from annoyance to sheer terror the moment she saw her husband standing there. She barely had time to react before I stepped forward, my voice sweet but laced with venom. "Hi, Vanessa. Thought you should know. Your weekend getaway is over." Her eyes widened as she looked at me, then at Daniel, then back at me. Panic set in as she realized what was happening, as she registered the envelope in my hand, stuffed with printouts of her messages. And when I held it up and said, "I hope you're ready for the consequences," she let out a scream so loud the entire hallway went silent. Vanessa didn't say anything at first. She looked at Mark, then at Daniel, like she was searching for the right excuse, but there wasn't one. Daniel's expression didn't change as he reached for the envelope and flipped through the proof himself. He read every message, every hotel receipt, everything that laid out exactly what his wife had been doing for months. Vanessa finally opened her mouth, but before she could get a word out, I spoke first. 7 months. That's how far back the messages went. Probably longer, but that was as much as I could track. She barely whispered that she had been planning to tell him, that she hadn't meant for it to happen like this. Daniel didn't even acknowledge that. He asked a simple question: when? Before or after the weekend trip she had been so excited for. Because the way he saw it, she wasn't planning on coming clean at all. Vanessa stammered through something about not wanting to hurt him, but Daniel didn't let her finish. Hurt him? She had spent months lying straight to his face. She had left their house, kissed their kids goodnight, and run off to hotel rooms with Mark, and now she wanted to act like this wasn't who she was? Mark finally decided to open his mouth, saying he knew it looked bad, but Daniel cut him off before he could get another word in. He didn't want to hear whatever weak defense Mark had rehearsed in his head. He didn't want an apology, an excuse, or any pathetic attempt at justification. There was nothing either of them could say that would make this anything other than what it was. Mark didn't have the nerve to look at him, which was probably the smartest decision he'd made all night. Daniel turned back to Vanessa, shaking his head like he was finally seeing her for who she really was. He was done. He wanted a divorce. Vanessa panicked. She told him not to make a decision like that in the heat of the moment, that they could fix this if they just sat down and talked, that she didn't love Mark, that it wasn't serious, that it didn't mean anything. Daniel just laughed at that. If it didn't mean anything, then why risk everything for it? Why send those messages? Why meet Mark in secret over and over again? He had trusted her. He had built a life with her, and she threw it away? There was no fixing this. There was no coming back from it. Vanessa begged, but Daniel was already walking away. She called after him, but he didn't stop. Mark looked at me then, like he thought this meant we were on the same side now, that since we were both being left behind, I'd be willing to hear him out. I pulled out my phone and sent a message. His entire demeanor changed in an instant. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I was filing for divorce. He started to say something, but I didn't care to hear it. I told him that his credit cards weren't going to work anymore either. I had canceled them that morning. He looked like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to convince me that I was overreacting. But I wasn't interested. Vanessa turned to me, voice shaking, and said I didn't have to do this, that I didn't have to ruin everything, that this didn't have to be how it ended. I just looked at her. She made her choices. She didn't care about ruining my life when she was sleeping with my husband. She didn't care about destroying her own marriage either, so why should I care now? I told her exactly that. Mark tried again, insisting that we could work through this, that maybe we could at least talk about it, but I didn't even acknowledge him. I had wasted enough of my life on him. I turned and walked out. I was halfway to the elevator when I heard Vanessa scream. I didn't look back when I left that hotel. Vanessa's screaming didn't make me stop, and Mark calling after me didn't matter. I had done what I came to do, and now I was done. No second chances, no drawn-out arguments, no letting them twist the situation into something it wasn't. I walked out of there with my head high because I was finally free from all of it. The drive home was quiet. I should have been upset, maybe even crying. But I wasn't. I felt lighter, like I had dropped a weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying. There was nothing left to wonder about. No more suspicion, no more questioning if I was just imagining things. I had seen the truth, confronted it head-on, and walked away. That was more closure than most people got in situations like this. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and sent one final message. To a lawyer. I had already looked into divorce before I even confronted them, just in case, so I knew exactly who I wanted to handle everything. I didn't need advice. I didn't need time to think, I just needed paperwork drawn up so I could cut Mark out of my life as fast as possible. He had already been erased from my mind, now I just had to erase him legally. Mark must have realized that I wasn't coming back to that hotel, because about an hour later he started calling. I let the phone ring the first few times, but after the fourth attempt, I picked up. Not because I wanted to hear what he had to say, but because I wanted to make something very clear. This isn't going to be one of those fights where you talk your way out of it, I said before he could speak. This isn't a fight at all. I'm done. Lily, just listen, he said. I screwed up. I know that. But we've been together for years. You're really just going to throw everything away over one mistake? One mistake, I repeated, letting the words sink in. That's interesting because when I went through your messages, I saw months of mistakes. I saw hotel receipts, I saw plans, I saw an entire relationship that you built behind my back. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Over and over again. I don't love her, he said quickly. It was just something stupid. It didn't mean anything. Then why risk everything for it? He didn't have an answer. I already contacted a lawyer, I continued. You'll be getting the paperwork soon. You don't have to do that. We can fix this. No, you can fix this. You can fix your own damn life because I'm not going to be part of it anymore. Mark let out a frustrated breath. Come on, Lily. We have history. Doesn't that count for something? It did, but not anymore. There was silence on the other end. He was scrambling for something, anything, that might make me change my mind, but there was nothing left to say. Where am I supposed to go? He finally asked. Not my problem, I said before hanging up. The calls didn't stop after that. Neither did the texts. They started with apologies, then shifted into him trying to justify everything, then moved into begging. I ignored all of them. He didn't get to invade my life anymore. I blocked his number and went to bed, knowing that for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to worry about him. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed. I wasn't dwelling on anything. I wasn't wondering if I had made the right decision. I had no doubt that this was the best thing I had ever done for myself. That feeling only got better when I checked my email and saw a message from Daniel. Thank you for telling me the truth. I'm filing for divorce today. Hope you're doing okay. I responded with a simple, you deserve better. We both do. That was the end of our interaction, and honestly, it was all that needed to be said. I didn't expect us to stay in touch or become friends. We had both been blindsided by the same betrayal, but now we were handling it in our own ways. Later that afternoon, Mark showed up at the house. I wasn't surprised. He had nowhere else to go. His name wasn't on the deed, and he didn't have any savings of his own because I had been the one handling our finances. He stood on the porch, knocking and calling my name, but I didn't answer. Eventually, he tried the doorknob, but it didn't budge. I had already changed the locks. After a few minutes, he finally gave up and sat down on the steps. I watched from the window as he pulled out his phone, probably texting someone else for help. He didn't have many options. Most of our mutual friends had already heard what happened, and none of them were on his side. Even his own family wasn't willing to defend him. He had spent years building a life that he thought was untouchable, but in the end, he had destroyed it with his own choices. He stayed there for almost an hour before finally leaving. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. I just want to talk, please? I didn't reply. I spent the next few days focusing on myself. I went out with friends, started making plans I had put off for years, and slowly started redecorating the house to make it mine again. Every trace of Mark was removed. Every piece of furniture or decoration that reminded me of him was replaced. I wanted a fresh start, and I wasn't going to let anything from my past drag me down. Mark, on the other hand, was falling apart. A friend of mine ran into him a few days later and told me he looked rough, exhausted, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from the last time she saw him. He was staying at a cheap motel, trying to figure out what to do next. Vanessa wasn't helping him. After the way everything had blown up, she was probably too busy dealing with her own divorce. They had ruined their lives for each other, but now they were both alone. I thought that was the end of it. I thought Mark would eventually accept reality and disappear from my life completely. But just when I was ready to move forward without a second thought, I got a message from a different number. You ruined my life. I hope you're happy. I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message. I was happy, and he was finally living with the consequences of his own actions. But I wasn't done yet. Mark's message didn't bother me. If anything, it was proof that everything was finally catching up to him. He wasn't mad at himself for destroying our marriage. He was mad at me for not letting him get away with it. That wasn't my problem. He had dug his own grave, and now he had to live in it. I deleted the text and didn't think about him again. The divorce process was smooth, mostly because Mark had no power to fight anything. He had no claim to the house, no savings, and no way to drag it out without making his own life harder. The lawyer sent over the paperwork and I signed without hesitation. Mark, on the other hand, took his time. Like delaying it would somehow make a difference, but eventually he signed too. That was it. Just like that, he was officially out of my life. I expected that to be the end of it, but a week later I got a message from Vanessa. "I just want to talk, please." I almost laughed. Talk? About what? How sorry she was? How she didn't mean for any of this to happen? How she lost everything and wanted me to feel bad for her? She had no right to ask anything from me. I ignored the message and moved on with my day. An hour later she sent another one. "I need to explain. It wasn't just me." I paused, rereading the message. She wasn't just trying to apologize. She was shifting blame. Maybe she thought throwing Mark under the bus would somehow fix things. But I didn't care. There was nothing left to explain. She had destroyed her marriage just like Mark had destroyed ours. If she wanted to tell herself a different version of the story, that was her problem. I blocked her number and moved on. From what I heard, her life had completely fallen apart. Daniel had kicked her out of their home and filed for full custody of their kids. He wasn't just angry, he was furious. He had proof that she had been sneaking around for months, which meant he had an easy case for divorce and custody. She wasn't just losing her husband, she was losing everything. No family, no money, no place to go, and Mark sure as hell wasn't going to take her in. That was the best part. The two of them had thrown everything away for each other, and in the end, they had nothing. Mark had no stable job, no home, no support system. Vanessa had lost her marriage, her reputation, and any shred of control over the situation. They didn't even end up together. A friend of mine ran into Mark a few weeks later. He was staying in a dingy apartment with a roommate he barely knew. No job, barely any money, completely alone. He had tried reaching out to mutual friends, but none of them wanted anything to do with him. Even his own family had distanced themselves, embarrassed by what he had done. He had gone from having a comfortable, stable life to being pathetic. Vanessa was even worse off. With no one to turn to, she had been bouncing between friends' couches, trying to figure out what to do next. She had tried to reach out to Daniel, but he wasn't interested. She had destroyed their marriage, and he wasn't going to give her a chance to fix it. She had texted multiple people, trying to explain, trying to get sympathy, but no one cared. I never responded to her. I didn't need to. Her life was already ruined. As for me, I thrived. I moved on faster than I thought I would. I redecorated the house, removed every single trace of Mark, and started making plans that I had put off for years. I went on trips, spent time with friends, and focused on myself in a way I hadn't in a long time. There wasn't a single part of me that missed him. If anything, I was grateful that I had found out when I did. He thought he had broken me, but all he did was free me from wasting any more of my life on him. One day, months later, I got a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." I didn't need to ask who it was. I just deleted the message and kept living my life. Because I had already won.